Now we are going to the second presentation. Our presenter is Javier Villavicencio. He's from Texas A&M University. He's a PhD in agricultural economics and instructional assistant professor in the Department of Agricultural Economics at the Texas A&M University Higher Education Center in McAllen, Texas. His research focuses on applying quantitative methods to agribusiness management, with particular interests in price determination and consumer preference in agricultural markets, risk assessment and optional production in farm management, and the impacts of climate change on agricultural productivity. Dr. Villavicencio teaches both theoretical and applied courses, including fundamentals of agricultural economics analysis, macroeconomics and agricultural price analysis. So on to you, Dr. Javier.
Thank you, Dr. Julio, and everybody here. I am very happy to stay here today with you to present my work. I just want to make sure that you are listening to me.
Yes, we can hear you. It's perfect.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let me start. Okay, thank you. It's 8:30, so I'm going to try to be on time for you. Uh, The title of my work today is Innovative Crop Allocation Strategies for Sustainable Agriculture in the case of water-scarce conditions. This is a work I am working with Samuel Zapata and Jorge Martinez from Texas A&M University, who are my colleagues here in the McAllen area. I'm going to start with a brief definition of what do we mean by crop allocation strategy? I want to define this in order for everybody to understand what we are talking about. First, we want to define what an optimal crop mix is. This optimal crop mix represents the strategic selection by the farmer of different crops within a farm to maximize production or to maximize profitability, or in other cases, ecological benefits, or many goals at the same time. There are some models that can do that. Or we can use these models to reduce bad outcomes, for example, costs or losses or risk. These decisions, these planting decisions, so the farmer must decide what am I going to grow in the next season, right? So am I going to grow corn or soybean or cotton? This is the decision that the farmer faces here in my case, in the case of this area. I'm going to explain that thing with more detail in a little bit. But these planting decisions are affected by many factors at the same time. The first one are the individual goals. What is the most important goal for me to optimize? Also, market conditions that the farmer faces at the time that they sell the products. Also, the environmental factors. And finally, this is not the only factor that can affect, okay? I am just simplifying the reality too much. And also by the ability of resources. For example, irrigation water, that is the case that we are going to use in this presentation. The objectives of this work is to present two risk-efficient crop selection strategy that we have developed to stabilize farm profits given limited production resources, such as water. We also want to evaluate the optimal planting decisions for the area of South Texas in the amid severe water shortage that have occurred in the recent years, and that all the experts agree that we expect to have in the coming future. First, I want to talk about this area, South Texas, or also known as the Rio Grande Valley here. This is a strip of about 100 miles that goes from, here it is in the south of Texas, that goes from Rio Grande City to the city of Brownsville in the Gulf of Mexico. In this area, this is a subtropical area, very different from other places in the state of Texas, in which the winters are mild, so and the summers are very hot. Okay, so this area is able to for some products of agriculture, different from other places in the U.S. And in this area, we can grow, for example, cotton, citrus. Uh, this is the only area in Texas that we can grow citrus, by the way. Vegetables, grain sorghum, corn, and sugarcane. These are the most important products that farmers grow in this area. And this is the economic value. We have the economic value until year 2023, in which we have also the production of sugarcane. Okay, I am going to talk about the sugarcane case because it's very relevant for this work. What happened, and this information comes from the Texas A&M Agri-Life Extension Service, that we have a experimental extension here in this area. Okay, and what is the problem with that, or what is the main characteristic of the Rio Grande Valley? Is that this area is also very arid. Okay, it doesn't rain too much. It rains a little. It rains a low quantity over the year. And for irrigation purposes, for agricultural purposes, we rely too much on the water that comes from the Rio Grande Valley. So the river is the main source of irrigated water. And when it is not raining, or maybe when we don't have enough water in the river or in the reservoirs, there is no enough water for agriculture. So in that case, the farmers must take the decision about what to grow, especially when the water is very scarce. This is another graph that shows the quantity of water that is used by county in Texas. As we can notice here in the south, okay, this is mainly an agricultural area of the state. The use of water is very high compared to other places in the state. And as you can see here, this green area means that most of the water is used for irrigation purposes. Okay, and the red area means that is used for residential purposes. As we can see here in this area, we also have like 5 or 6 cities, medium-sized cities, that use water for residential uses, but approximately 75% of the water is used for agriculture. So we can notice here that there are many uses that are competing for the water here. And when the water is scarce, when it is not raining too much, this puts a lot of pressure, especially to agriculture, because residential use is a priority. Another data here, this is data from year 2021, in basically from the counties that form part of this Rio Grande Valley area. There are 4 counties here: Cameron, Hidalgo, Starr, and Willacy counties. And these are the crops. This is the information that we have from the Texas Water Development Board about the crop acreage, and also the use of water in acre feet, and also the use of water per acre, okay, to know which one of these crops consume more water. As we can see here, sugarcane is basically the crop that consumes more, approximately 4 acre feet per acre in the Cameron County, with a maximum of 5 acre feet per acre in the Hidalgo County. As you can see here, it is by far the crop that uses more water than compared with other crops. okay? And for this reason, I want to explain something here. There is a water treaty from 1944 that the United States signed with Mexico related to the amount of water that must be released from the Mexican tributaries, rivers, okay, and other sources to the Rio Grande Valley to feed these reservoirs that are in this river, the Amistad Reservoir and the Falcon Reservoir. And this red line here tell us the amount of water that Mexico is committed to deliver to the river by year. Okay, this is the cumulative quantity. And according to this treaty, by the year 2025, Mexico had to, in theory, deliver approximately 1,800,000 acre feet of water to the river, but in the reality, because of the droughts that we are having here in the last years, in the last few years, the amount of water that Mexico has delivered to the river, to the Rio Grande River, is just 600,000 acre feet, which is less than approximately 35% of the commitment. As we can see here in this graph, this is the level of water in the reservoir. And since year 2000, as we can notice here, the amount of water in the reservoir has been far below the conservation level of the dams. Okay, so this has put a lot of pressures to agriculture. So we must decide, the farmers must decide, am I going to keep growing this crop, or maybe I have to switch to another kind of crop, okay? And also the decision also takes into account if I can grow any crop with using irrigation water or with no irrigation water. The most shocking case in this area is what happened with the sugarcane. Because of the shortage of water, as you can see here in this picture, one of these reservoirs, the Falcon Reservoir, was basically empty 1 year ago. This was a very critical situation, so there was no water basically for agriculture, and this happens last year. There was a sugar mill here in Texas, the last sugar mill in South Texas. It has to shut down because there was no water to grow sugarcane. So this sugar mill has to shut down, and we have had some political issues with Mexico because of that, okay? Some people believe that Mexico is not delivering the water because they don't want to, but some other experts believe that, agree that the reason is that it's not raining here in South Texas and in the north of Mexico, so there is no water to deliver. Now, with this background, we want to present our crop selection strategies. Okay, we are going to present two crop selection strategies using the following assumption. Given an expected level of return that I want to obtain, a risk-averse farmer will prefer the crop allocation with the smallest risk among all the feasible options that produce that expected target return. Okay, so we are going to assume that there are many alternatives in which I can obtain the same expected return, but in theory, okay, and also in the practice, we can demonstrate that there is one allocation of crops that is optimal. It means that has the minimum risk. This problem, I am going to talk about this thing at the end, but this problem is solved ideally at the farm level, okay? So this problem is going to be run in a representative farm model, subject to water availability, farm characteristics, and market conditions that the farm faces. And the two proposed strategies are the first one, we call it the mean variance strategy, in which we are going to set the level of expected return, and we are going to try to minimize the risk defined as the variance of the portfolio. Okay, so we are going to select the crop allocation that give us the least variance possible. Also, the other proposed strategy here, this is our main contribution here, because the mean variance approach has been used in other works in the past. We are going to introduce risk as another definition. We are going to take this concept from finance, okay, the value at risk, and what is the value at risk? Is the amount of money that the company is going to lose in the most unfavorable situation, okay? So we are going to define risk in this case as the probability of a very unfavorable return, okay? This is calculated using the cumulative distribution function of the returns, okay? So we have two approaches, right? The first one is try to minimize the variance of the portfolio, and the other one is to try to minimize the probability of the worst scenario case. Okay, and both approaches show us this kind of relationship. We have seen this, we have taken this from finance, as I said before. This is, let me use my pen here. Okay, there is a positive relationship between the expected return that a firm has and the risk associated with this decision, okay? So we know that the higher the return we want, the higher the risk of that decision, okay? If we are in the efficient frontier. However, many times we don't take efficient decisions, okay, in the sense that we are optimizing something. Many times we can be here, okay, in a theoretical case, okay, in which we have this amount of return and this amount of risk. And if we use these mathematical programming techniques that we are going to present, in theory, I can change my allocation of crops, or I can change my portfolio in order to have higher returns with the same risk. Okay, this is one approach. I can put the risk as given and change the portfolio in order to have higher returns. The other approach here is that I can be here, for example. I can have a situation with this amount of risk and this amount of return. And I can use my model, okay, a different version of the model, in which I can define the level of return as fixed and use the model to reduce the risk. Okay, whatever the risk is, whichever the risk is calculated. Okay, I am going to define how the risk is calculated in the next slide. So this is basically what we are doing here. We are taking, for example, any arbitrary solution, and then we are going to fit the model in order to for it to calculate the most efficient allocation of crops, okay? For this work, I am going to present the first version, the one in which we fix the risk level, and then we are trying to obtain the higher possible return. How do we estimate, or how do we calculate the expected net returns? We are using a combination of factors that affect the return of the company. The first one is the revenues, okay? The price times the production. The price are taken from the Food and Agricultural Policy Research Institute from the University of Missouri. Okay, we are taking the prices from there. We are taking the production from the USDA, the National Agricultural Statistical Service. We are taking data from 1981 to 2023. And also, well, we are subtracting the production costs that depend on the level of production. we are taking the cost values from the Texas A&M Agri-Life Extension Service. This is basically from the production budgets. And we also are taking into account that the agricultural insurance, okay? There are some agricultural insurance products here in the US in which the producer can receive an indemnity depending on the level of production. If the level of production is too low, the farmer is going to receive an indemnity. And we have to subtract the premium that the farmer is paying. So all this term, we call it RI, okay? This is the return of the firm in a given situation, okay, with a given, the expected return of the firm with a given crop. And the total expected return of the portfolio is this weighted average, okay, is the expected return for crop I multiplied by the amount of crop I that I grow, okay? And we have to sum all these values to get the expected return of the whole portfolio, okay? These W's are we can give like an arbitrary value at the beginning, and then we run the model and we are going to obtain the optimal values, okay? The optimal values are going to tell us how much of each crop I must grow in my area, okay? So the last thing I want to talk about before presenting my results, okay, before presenting the result, is why are we proposing these two alternatives, okay? The mean variance approach has been used in the past, but the mean variance approach is assuming something. If the returns were symmetrical, okay, look at this. We have this blue distribution and the red distribution. So for a given farmer, if the farmer wants to minimize the risk, the less risky, alternative is the blue one because it has the lowest variance. However, since these two distributions are symmetrical, the probability of a bad event is basically the same here. However, when the returns are not symmetrical, which is what we usually see in the reality, okay, we can have a situation like this graph, okay, in which I have the blue distribution, which has a lower variance. Both distribution has the same mean, the same expected value. We can have the situation in which I have a distribution with a lower variance, but with a higher probability of a bad outcome, okay? So in this case, when the returns are not symmetric, the minimum variance approach is not the best way to assess risk, because in this case, the probability of a bad event can be higher. So when we have this situation that we have noticed with the data that we have collected, we have identified that maybe the best approach is to minimize the probability of the worst case scenario, the probability of a bad outcome. And this is what we call it the VAR approach, okay? We are going to present both approaches for you today to compare these two ones, okay? So these are my data, the data that we are using here. And this is real data from the real grant body, okay, in which we have, well, for some reason, I am going to explain in a minute what is going on here, okay? So we have 6 different types of crop here: cotton, corn, and sorghum, irrigated and non-irrigated. As you can notice here, the non-irrigated has a positive net return. And this has to do with because we have had low prices in the last few years. We have had a higher cost in the last few years, okay? And irrigation cost is also high. So in this case, these crops, the irrigated crops, we must expect that the irrigated crops must have a higher return. But with the latest data we have the inverse situation, okay? But we can use this data to calculate our results. And this is the distribution, the crop mix, the average crop mix in the Rio Grande Valley from 2019 to 2023, okay? So this is the distribution of corn irrigated, cotton irrigated, sorghum irrigated, and all the other non-irrigated crops, okay? We are taking into account that we are using the 100% of the available water, and the expected return, the return of this situation, the one that we see in the reality, has been negative $8.66, okay? With a standard deviation of $40 and with a probability of outcome below negative 8.86 or 49%, okay? And this is the distribution of the returns here. So I am going to go, maybe it is more important to show the conclusions here from the result, but I want to show the result here. What happens when we apply the mean variance strategy? In the mean variance strategy, we are defining the same standard deviation as before, okay? And we are moving upward to find a combination of crops that give us a higher expected value. And as you can see here, this distribution assumes 100% of water, the same amount of water that we have before, okay? So we can see a different distribution from what we observe in this pie chart, okay? This distribution says that when using the mean variance strategy, we have to basically split my production because cotton irrigated, cotton non-irrigated, and sorghum non-irrigated. And what happens if we have less water? For example, this is arbitrary value, 50% less water. The model says that we must use almost 50% of non-irrigated corn, and the rest of it split it, okay, between sorghum non-irrigated, corn irrigated, and also the model says that maybe when we have no water, okay, it's a good idea to leave some area idle, okay? Some area idle means that we are not going to grow anything because it's not worth it. This is the fishing frontier, okay? This is the mathematical problem if somebody wants to go deeper into the math, okay? I don't have too much time, so I am going to run a little bit here. Okay, in the various strategy, we have a different solution here. Remember, in this strategy, we are trying to minimize the probability of having a bad outcome. Again, we are setting the probability of a bad outcome as 49%, okay? And we are trying to find the crop allocation that give us the highest expected return. Okay, according to this model, the crop that the farmer must grow basically is 52% of sorghum non-irrigated, okay, and also cotton irrigated, corn irrigated, and corn non-irrigated. When we are restricting the amount of water available, the model is going to tell us that the farmer must increase the amount of corn non-irrigated to be planted, okay? The amount of sorghum non-irrigated is reduced from 52% to 15%, and also, well, corn irrigated remains basically the same, and we don't plant cotton irrigated anymore, okay? We don't plant cotton here. We are just leaving 50% of the area out. Okay, this is the same for this kind of approach. We observed that the farmers actually are here, and with our model, we can obtain higher returns, okay, with 100% water or with 50% water. As you can see here, we can obtain the same risk, but with higher expected returns. This is basically what we are obtaining here. Well, my final remarks. These systematic crop selection strategies can generate efficiencies in the resource utilization. That translates into higher return with the same risk or even with lower risk. We can use this model in two ways. Also, when we develop these aid tools, okay, we want to develop an aid tool for the farmers, okay? We work very much with extension agencies, so our goal is to share this information with the farmers for them to take the best decisions of planting here in the area, okay? So we are evaluating here the risk of crop choices. We are also identifying the optimal crop mix, and the good thing about this model is that it considers market conditions, first characteristics, and the physical constraints, for example, water or any other natural resource that we can be interested in. Okay, and for this reason, these strategies can be extended to other locations in the United States or any other area with limited resources. Okay, and we can extend this approach to many cases here in the US and abroad. The final thing that I want to talk, and maybe I can discuss this thing in the question section. Okay, we don't have information about each individual farm. Okay, so we use an approximation using aggregate data at the county level. And it has been documented in many papers that when we do that thing, we have what we call the aggregation bias. Okay, so when we have an aggregation bias, the results are a little bit different from what we have if we use individual farm data, okay? Because individual farm data has more variability. So we are working on some tools to reduce this aggregation bias in order to get a very good approximation of farm level information. And with this, I am finishing my presentation. I hope you enjoy it, and uh, your questions are welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Villavicencio. So it was indeed a great presentation. Let's open for questions.
I have one. Thank you very much, Professor Xavier. It was very interesting as well, as you told us. So maybe one question I wanted to understand. So those are very interesting findings. How can we, the agribusiness managers and also policymakers really enforce this kind of diversification into practice? How do you see this? These research findings coming through practice.
Thank you, Dr. Rodrigo. Yes, your question is very relevant here because these extension offices here usually work with farmers all the time, okay? And many times the degree of adoption of these new findings are not so high, okay? Sometimes because the farmers just want to keep doing the things as they have always done in the past. Okay, this is one reason. Sometimes they prefer to do that, or they don't want to get into risky situations. But we usually work with experimental farms. We develop many workshops here in which we show the farmers how to deal with that. I want to emphasize that usually bigger farms have some research and development teams, okay, in which they work with these kind of things all the time. But usually a small farmer, they don't have this kind of resources to know how to optimize the crop allocation, okay? So in extension activities, we usually try to deal with that. There is a lot of communication and outreach activities in which we present our findings to try to create a bridge, right, between the science and the real application of these tools. We have had some success applying other tools here in this area. This is a new, those are new findings, so we are still on an early level, but we hope that these tools are going to be useful for farmers, especially small farmers that live here in this area.
Oh, thank you so much. Very, very interesting.
Okay.
Thank you.